All right, you ready for more? Here we go. Actually, what I didn't tell you in the last video is you can go ahead and pause this video after I'm done right here. And I want you to go ahead and jot down those two different characteristics that we discussed in the last video onto your slideshow where it says list the 7 characteristics. So you can jot those two down. It was all living things are composed of cells or made of cells. Composed means made. And then all living things have different levels of organization. So they're organized. They're made of cells and they're organized. So pause now if you need to record that. All right, here we go. Living things use energy. So this is number 3. Living things use energy. And I talked briefly about that in the last video, right? That like when we think of energy that we use and how we get energy into our bodies, we eat, right? So just because you're consuming doesn't mean that that's the only way to get energy. Plants in particular obtain energy in a very different way. They use the sun's rays for energy. So they let the UV light come down and radiate the top of their leaves, which has chlorophyll, and we're going to learn all about these. These chloroplasts, these little pieces inside of the cell, are going to get radioactive, pretty much, right? They get blasted with this UV light, and that creates a chain reaction, which allows them to produce sugar, glucose. So they produce this very simple sugar, and then they use that sugar and they consume it. So yeah, it's like the sun is their food, but actually their food is sugar, and the sun allows them to create sugar that they then use to power their bodies or their plant systems, right? So plants use energy. Bacteria uses energy because guess what? It's a decomposer. It loves to eat dead stuff. It'll even eat off of living material too. So it does eat. It does consume. So all living things need energy because they do stuff. All right, let's keep going. Number 4. Living things respond to their environment. All living things respond to their environment. Now, let's look at what it says down below. Living things will make changes in response to a stimulus in their environment. That sounds confusing. A stimulus is anything that causes a reaction. So if I have a dog and I kick my dog, which I would never do, but let's say I kick my dog, that's a stimulus, right? That's an action upon them or something that happens that's going to incite a reaction. And my dog might come back and bite me as a result, depending on how hard I kick him. Or maybe my dog will cower and cry, right? But there'll be some sort of reaction. Now you might think, well, plants don't seem to react. They don't respond when I snap them in half. Well, they do. They die, number 1. Or here's kind of a more general one. Plants respond to the sun. So imagine a sunflower. Big, beautiful, bright sunflower, right? Post Malone, okay? So the sunflower, what it does is it follows the sun. In fact, my camera is mirroring me, so I have to do like this, right? East to west. I'm going to confuse myself. I'm just going to face east because I know this way is east in my house. So the sun rises in the east, right? And it comes up and it sets in the west. Well, a sunflower, especially in the juvenile state, will go ahead and follow the sun throughout the day. So there's this one gigantic sunflower field near Ellensburg that I always notice in the summertime. And when I don't go to Ellensburg often, but when I drive to Ellensburg, I'm headed west, okay? And I usually do it in the morning. And the one thing I notice that blows my mind every time is as I'm driving down the road, all those sunflowers are facing me, and it's so beautiful. These big, bright sunflowers that you can really see from the freeway. And then I do my shopping, and I usually take a while. And then I drive back home, so I'm headed east now. And guess what? Once again, those sunflowers, they're facing me, and it's so beautiful to come across again because throughout the day, as the sun rose, they followed the sun. Midday while I was shopping, they were here. When I was headed home, they were following the sun as it was setting. And so I got to have a beautiful view of it all day long as I drove in and out of town, right? And that's because they like to follow and respond to the sun's rays. Or how about this? When it gets really cold out, at night especially, flowers tend to close up. But then as it gets hot throughout the day, they will open back up to enjoy the sun's rays and to allow bees and other little pollinators to come and visit. So they respond to the stimulus of the sun, right? So response can be very different. In fact, here it tells us a behavior is a complex set of responses. So what that means is like a bunny rabbit's behavior of digging into the ground to create burrows or dens. That's a behavior, and it's a very complex set of responses to be able to protect themselves from predators. All right, let's keep going. Last one, I think, for this short video is we'll talk about living things grow. And I think a lot of us, that's kind of one of the very first things we come to mind when we think about what does it mean to be living? Well, it means that you can grow, right? And so in these tiny microscopic organisms that are only one cell large, these unicellular or single-celled organisms like bacteria, they don't grow to become large. So we don't usually see that growth. And even, you can't see a bacteria with your bare eye, so you don't think it grows much, but it does. It might grow from a very tiny cell to a mature size cell. And for you and I that are not bacterial experts, that's hard to see. But for a biologist who is a bacterial expert, they can tell the difference because they can measure that growth in these microscopic nanometers. But you and I, that's harder for us to conceptualize. But all living things grow. And that growth is through cell division sometimes, right? You and I, we grow through creating more cells. Or sometimes it's cell enlargement, like with bacteria. And let's see, an organism gets larger as the number of cells increases. So for you and I, all cells are microscopic. So our cells are all microscopic. And yeah, they do grow from when they're tiny to their mature size. But how we get bigger is we make more cells to make ourselves bigger. So if you're a little teeny tiny baby, you're made of less cells than a grown adult. And if you're a big, big dude, you're made of more cells than maybe a little petite person, right? Because as you get larger, you create more and more cells. All right, so check out the next video for our last two characteristics. Make sure you write these two down that we talked about just now. Actually, we talked about three. We talked about living things use energy. Living things respond to their environment, and living things grow. So you should have 6. Is that what we came up with? Or 5? You should have 5 written down already.